Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I'm with Kody Beer, K3KLB.
Yeah, hi Kevin. Thanks for having me on.
So tell me about this photo. It was, first of all, you're an awesome photographer, and I'm always attracted to the work you do with photography. But tell me about this setup that you did for Winter Field Day.
Yeah, so this was my third winter field day in a row. I've been doing it for 3 years now, and each year I've kind of built on the lessons from the last year. And so this year I operated from an Eskimo ice tent on the shores of Pymatuning Lake. And I sat in there. It was actually very cold outside. It was about 20 degrees for most of the operation, sometimes down into the single digits. And kept it nice and warm with a buddy heater, propane heat, and operated the BuddiHex and also an inverted V antenna. And it was quite successful this year compared to the last couple years ever.
Tell me what success looked like.
The last couple years, first year I did it, I had a couple hundred QSOs, about 250 or so, and I was stranded outside on a picnic table and didn't have any sort of shelter. I operated as an outdoor station, of course, and I said, well, for next year, I'm going to make sure I operate from somewhere warm, but I still want to be in the outdoors, per se. So I purchased the Eskimo ice tent to help me with parks on the air. And last year, I operated with the ice tent, but I made the the awful mistake of not staking it out. And that kind of ended my operation about a day early because Sunday the ice tent was actually in the lake. So, but for this year, we got it staked out really well. And yeah, I operated for a full 12 hours in that little warm ice shack and had 1,000 QSOs altogether after 12 hours of operating. I ended up working every bend from 70 centimeters up to 80 meters, and quite a few QSOs in every band.
And Kody, I know that Parks on the Air is really important to you, and it may even be the majority of the ham radio work that you do, but you've been making, I would say, upwards of 40,000 QSOs in the time that you've been operating with Parks in the Air. I think you've activated over 600 parks. Tell me what the attraction was to Parks in the Air early on.
So I've done 600 activations, a little over 600 from almost 150 unique parks. And yeah, coming up on a little over 40,000 QSOs at this point. I've started activating in the middle of 2021. I got my general license, I think it was August of 21, and one of the local hams, he actually introduced me to Parks on the Air, and it's kind of like smoking. It only took one activation to get hooked on it, and kind of the rest is history from there.
And this Winter Field Day, I presume it was from an actual Parks on the Air park.
Yeah, it was actually fully within the boundaries of US 1407, Pymatuning State Park, and I have the unique opportunity and luxury, I guess, of my property butts directly up against the state park. So actually, I don't have to go very far for this kind of operation. Actually, my entire front yard, you may have seen some pictures, but that entire front yard is owned fully by the state park. And the lake is actually a few hundred yards away from me. So I could have my entire operation set up fully within the state park and take credit for POTA as well.
Okay, so this is starting to make some sense. This is really your home QTH that happens to border a park. That's really convenient.
Yeah. Rarely do I ever activate, that close to home. The park I live next to, it's a lake and it's about 13 miles long, and there's numerous, boat launches and day use areas and things like that. And I've activated Pymatuning, I think, about 220 times now, just on the Pennsylvania side of things. The park is actually split up between PA and Ohio, and overall I've activated Pymatuning close to 300 times between both states, and I've probably covered just about every single area you could activate from this park, just probably covered every square inch of it.
And Kody, I was reading your QRZ page, and it looks like you've used a variety of different pieces of equipment and antennas over the years. What did you choose to use for this Winter Field Day? I know you've described the Eskimo portable shack and the buddy heater, but what were you using for gear? And I think you had a hex beam from what I could tell from the photo.
Yeah, so I used the BuddiHex, and I've had that for over a year now. I've used it probably about a dozen times, and that thing really does have a commanding presence on the bands, especially for these kind of contest events where everybody's squeezed in real tight. and it really helps you to draw in signals that you really otherwise may not hear with all the QRM or the interference and things going on with stations being so close together. And with the hex beam, I set it up, I call it contest mode, where I have it set up for 6, 10, 15, and 20. So I omitted the work band elements for this operation. And if you see in the picture, I actually set the hex beam up directly up against the Eskimo shack. Since it's manually rotated, it's really handy. It's got that handle where you can just spin the hex beam to whatever direction you want it. And even though for the most part I did keep it pointed directly to the west, being in Pennsylvania, that allowed me to cover pretty much the entire lower 48. Plus I also worked Hawaii and Alaska with it. And but being right up next to the shelter, I'm able to reach my arm out the window of the ice tent and actually rotate the hex beam to draw in signals. And I actually also had an inverted V set up next to the hex beam, and for dual purpose actually allowed me to use down to 80 meters, but also if there's a station that was coming in really weak, for example, and I thought maybe they were coming in off the back of the hex beam, rather than having to take the time to spin it around, I had an antenna switch set up where I could actually flip it over to the inverted V, use it kind of like an omnidirectional receive antenna, and it actually helped me get quite a few extra contacts that I may not have, had time to spin the hex beam all around and take the time to do that.
And what were you using for a radio?
You used the IC 7300, and that's my actual home shack radio sitting right next to me. And if I'm going out for an extended operation, if I'm going to go camping or, participating in one of these events, then I'll take that out with me, because it's a rock star radio, and set up with the Howell microphone, the Howell Pro Set. It's you can't really beat it.
So let's go back to Winter Field Day and the rules. Just for those people who haven't operated in Winter Field Day, what are the hours and what are the rules?
Yeah, so Winter Field Day started on Saturday. I think it was 11 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday, and it ran until Sunday at, I believe it was 5 p.m. Eastern, which actually is a larger window from last year. I believe last year it was 2 p.m. Don't quote me. I think it was 24 hours, 2 to 2. But they extended it this year because there's so many people that operate from parks that it just made more sense, because starting at 2 p.m. here in the East Coast only allowed operators to participate until 5, 6, 7 o'clock once it got dark, because so many of these parks close at sunset. So bringing it forward up to 11 a.m. really helped many operators, including myself, have more hours to operate before they had to vacate the parks that they were activating.
And how many hours did you activate?
Fully, it was 12 hours from 11 a.m. until I think I wrapped things up on day one around 7 or 8 o'clock. And then I come out the next morning and got everything set up. And I was back on the air around 9. And I finished right around noon. I actually didn't operate for the full period. I was just so tired after making 1,000 contacts. I was like, you know what? I think we're ready to wrap things up. I checked my WinLink. I made some digital contacts, and took the time to pack everything back up.
And how did you handle the cold? I know you have a propane heater, but I've been in this situation. I've got a portable ice shack and I've got a propane heater, and it still gets pretty chilly under the tent. So how did you combat the cold?
Yeah, I was worried. I had lots of propane up here in the garage just in case I needed more, but I took a 20-pound tank with me down there, and I had the Buddy heater. I want to say it's 9,000 BTUs on high, and I ran that thing on high for the entire 12 hours, and I was kind of worried that I was going to run out of propane. So I would, every once in a while I would turn it down to low, and I would start to get cold, and flip it back up to high again. But surprisingly, there's still a decent amount of propane left after all that. But the only downside with the propane heat is the moisture, and I've had some thought about maybe looking into like a diesel heater option maybe for next time for the drier heat, but then you also have to worry about the potential for RFI or RF noise, and then of course you have to have an extra battery for that to run that as well. But moisture wasn't a real big issue. The inside of the shelter does start to sweat, and with the temperatures the way they were, you start to build up some frost in the inside of the tent. But for the most part, with it running on high, It was probably 65 degrees in there. It was pretty comfortable.
And Cody, were you running frequencies most of the time, or were you searching pouncing?
Yeah, I prefer to run a frequency, especially with the hex beam. That's the nice thing, is that I can have more of a presence on the band, a bigger signal. And I was getting signal reports anywhere from 20 over, 10 over across the country, coast to coast contacts, and you can't get that with a wire. And with 100 watts and a hex beam, it works pretty well. I like to set up on a frequency and call CQ, and especially with POTA, I'm really used to handling pileups, and this just kind of takes it to the next level, really, because sometimes the pileup just keeps on going with these kind of events.
And what advice would you have for somebody who hasn't participated in Winter Field Day before but would like to get out next year?
Just get on the air. Don't get intimidated. I mean, whenever I first started, hearing these sorts of contests and hearing the pileups and how fast-paced things can go, it can be definitely intimidating. But just get on the air, throw your call sign out there, and start making contacts, and you'll kind of get into a rhythm.
And I guess I'm curious, when you're doing a normal activation, are you into it for do 10, get the activation, and go home, or are you more the type that wants to settle in and make 80 contacts?
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, some days I don't have a lot of energy and don't want to, be out there for hours, but I'll go out there just from the mobile. I've got the dedicated mobile setup with my truck, and I'll just get 10 or 15 contacts and move on. Other days, I want to be out there for 3-4 hours and make, upwards of 400 or 500 contacts. Just kind of depends on how I'm feeling for the certain day. And I've done roves up to 15 parks in a day where, you really have to kind of move things along because you're kind of on a time constraint. And I really like to combine hobbies when I go outside and do different things, so I'll take my camera out like I did yesterday, and photograph eagles or sunsets and things like that. And ham radio kind of takes a backseat on those sorts of days. And like yesterday, I was actually operating FT8 in the background in my truck while I was shooting eagles out my driver's side window. So I was kind of doing two things at the same time. So it really just kind of depends.
Well, I think you just answered my next question. I was curious what it is about portable operation that interests you, and it sounds like in part you can do that other hobby. But I also know that you have a pretty demanding job. Is getting out and doing the portable operation kind of a stress relief from that demanding job?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, especially working in the hospital, taking care of people, and that kind of brings it back to if I have the energy to talk to people, because sometimes being at the hospital for 3 12s in a row, you really don't feel like talking a whole lot. So maybe you just do a quick activation or do something on digital, or you can just kind of relax and listen to music or something, and still operate the radio. I can go out and take a hike, and do some photography, or just involve other hobbies at the same time, and just kind of involve amateur radio at the same time. It's just one more thing to do, while I'm out in the outdoors.
So clearly you're enjoying ham radio. You're clearly a lot younger than I am. I would call you young. I look at you and I think, okay, this is the future of ham radio. What do you think about the hobby and what the future would look like for ham radio in the next 10 to 15 years?
I don't know. That's a tough question, because until I got involved in the hobby, I really didn't know anybody that was in the hobby, and I don't have any other local friends that are super close to my age. Most of the local hams are all late 30s, 40s, and I think upwards from there. But I'm not sure, because so many people are involved, social media and things like that, and young guys my age, they like technology. But at the same time, a lot of these radios are becoming so advanced, and with digital modes and stuff being more popular, that kind of draws people in. And I don't know, it's a tough question to ask. I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see how things pan out.
Well, Cody, I really appreciate you taking time to join me today, and we've talked a lot over the last couple of years, or frequently, and it's good to at least virtually meet you, and hopefully I'll get a chance to meet you in Dayton if you're going to be there.
Yeah, I'll be there. It's my third trip there, if that tells you anything. 30 years in a row. So it's cool to walk around there, and I'll wander around there the whole day and just keep on going through the same buildings over and over again, because you always see something different. There's so many people there that it's a great time.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it. So thanks again for joining me. My name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. I've been talking to Kody Beer, K3KLB. Can guarantee you, if you look at the POTA spotting page, you'll find him on there quite often. Thanks again, Cody.
Thanks, Kevin.